and there is a lot of talk and a lot of expectation on what Budget 2026 has in store for the defense sector as well as for the indigenous drones that India is now manufacturing. And some of these expectations are indeed fairly high, with the defense sector expected to see a double-digit rise in budget allocation. In addition to that, remember the 6.81 lakh crore rupees allocated for the defense sector in 2025 is also likely to see a capital outlay increase from about 26% to 30%. In addition to that, expectations are also rife on whether the allocation for research and development, especially for drones and component manufacturing, is likely to increase. And overall, is there going to be a chance that we also see the production-linked incentive of the PLI see a boost for the defense as well as the drone manufacturing sector? Well, let's put all this and more in perspective. We have Ankit Mehta, the co-founder of ideaForge, joining us on this edition. Ankit, thank you so much for your time, and what a pleasure seeing you again here on News9. First up, I want to just understand from you, you being an indigenous drone manufacturer, evenly spread across defense as well as civilian use drones. And by the way, congratulations on the fabulous December quarter numbers that you posted yesterday and the expansion in US. But beyond that, just 3 days, 4 days to go for the budget. Now, what are your specific expectations, first on the defense side and then on the civilian side of drone use?
Thanks, Kartik. It's a pleasure to be here on the news with you. I think it's very important that when we look at defense sector and what we have seen in terms of the urgency that is needed, the budget should reflect that urgency in terms of empowering the country with as many assets that we require to defend ourselves in the short term, as well as set us up for that long-term scenario where the long-term scenario in defense plays out, in the sense that we need to make sure that indigenous design, developed and manufactured, the IDDM category gets its special place, gets special carved out budgets for it, so that we can do a very big drive on what is being actually designed, developed and built in India.
Okay.
And I think that's going to be very, very important.
All right. So there is, of course, the design element, but beyond that, there is also this talk about indigenization of components. So while I understand that design is something that India is already excelling at, and manufacturing, assembly of drones is something that India is doing very well, there is also talk about the components, especially the cameras and the sensors, and potentially if there could be schemes around those which would incentivize not just the assembly of drones, but also this critical, proprietary component piece that goes into these drones. Are there specific expectations or wants that you have from Budget 2026?
Yes, absolutely. So, looking under the hood and realizing where that tech is also coming from is going to become very important, Kartik. And therefore, in order for that to fructify and that to become an important fulcrum of impetus, we need to look at, and we are expecting that there will be an announcement on a PLI scheme for drones and drone components. That's going to be very important because it will help us build that layer where even the internals are indigenized and are very, very strongly built in India with a lot of depth of technology control. Because in a real war, when we are fighting the war, the loop of iteration has to be as short as possible. And it's only possible when the control on the tech is indigenous and at the ground level. And that's something that we are expecting that scheme to help us. Also, for development of technology, we need upfront investments. We need upfront capital. And that upfront capital, if it comes in the form of R&D funds, particularly with the announcement of the RDI scheme and progress over that, I am expecting that not just building components in India should get incentivized in larger numbers, but also the fact that we should have the ability to invest behind building the technology upfront.
So, of course, that is the PLI on components, which expectations are rife is likely to be brought in as part of Budget 2026 and the overall expansion of the PLI scheme as well. But then also other tax incentives, there are some expectations, especially from brokerages, which are suggesting that tax incentive, faster depreciation, as well as some relief, which you mentioned again on the capital cost itself, which includes both R&D as well as the setting up of plants. But overall, on tax incentives, is there something that you have in mind which the finance minister could potentially deliver on the 1st of Feb?
See, I think from the drones point of view, the first thing had already happened where the clarification on GST rates happened
Right.
a few months back. That I think is one part which has already helped the industry. I think from a overall tax a subsidy on capital investments in the industry would again be very helpful because it will allow us to build upfront capacities, which is essential for a quick ramp up in production. Otherwise, quick ramp up in production cannot happen when we really need it in that one sense on the ground.
All right. Also, talk to us about this Drone Shakti initiative, which the government is likely to further add momentum to this year. And this, as we understand, is a 10,000 crore rupee initiative. It's likely to be a 5-year incentive scheme. And what we mentioned, the component indigenization is likely to find its real sort of feet in this particular initiative. And then, of course, you also mentioned the dual subsidy framework, which already is in place, which is some relief on Capex, about 15 to 20%, and the rest of it being production output driven. But do you see some sort of an increase in this Drone Shakti initiative? And is this something which is likely to increase at least the use case as much for civilian drones as it would for military drones?
So absolutely, I think from a drone Shakti point of view, my belief is that it will be an amalgamation of all of these incentives on one hand, and then of course, government, as you know, is one of the primary drivers of demand in this industry because a lot of the work that happens in the drone industry is related to large infrastructure on the civil side, or is it related to farming? And to boost both, if government is looking at investing heavily in the domain, then I would be very, very excited and happy to look at what's going to come there, where demand galvanization and demand increase happens in relevant areas, because those are areas that anyway serve a lot of our infrastructure and other domains.
You operate in the European market and now you're also expanding in the US market. Overall, do you believe, Ankit, in your opinion, that there should be potentially some export orientation schemes also for the drone sector in budget 2026, especially given the fact that EU is increasing its defense budgets, and just yesterday we signed the India-EU FTA as well. And there is this larger defense cooperation also in the works as part of that FTA and beyond with EU. Overall, do you believe that there needs to be some export orientation and focus on really making Indian drones and Indian defense equipment capable of export to global markets as well as especially the advanced markets?
I think overall, in terms of exports, one of the areas that we need to pay a lot of attention is to how do we promote successful technologies over here, the things that have cleared our overall, you can say evaluation criteria, have been qualified to be worthy of induction in the Indian Armed Forces. How do we make sure that we promote it very aggressively elsewhere in the world by setting up demonstrations, by boosting the industry, by ensuring that we are a part of the overall defense initiative that is happening between various bilateral dialogues and conversations. That's one part of what is required, and any boost that we can get to maintain or ease out the delta that comes by being from India presently, which is at a lower manufacturing base in defense as compared to some of our rival countries in the same space, would be very, very helpful for the industry to pitch itself more aggressively globally and then grab a lot of market share.
All right. And overall, as far as the allocation goes, the entire defense pack attracts as much as 6.81 lakh crore rupees in allocation. Now, what we've seen over the last 4 years or so, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Ankit, is that the nature of warfare has changed drastically. First, we saw that with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Then we've seen that in the Middle East also. And as well as in Operation Sindoor, we saw that that traditional forms of warfare are being replaced by modern warfare equipment like drones, like cyber attacks, and, and more precision-oriented long-range missiles. So overall, as part of the defense budget, do you think there needs to be some sectoral allocation which needs to look at this modernization of equipment for warfare, as opposed to perhaps just investing in building aircraft which can traditionally be bought from more advanced markets like France or even US for that matter, and Russia?
Absolutely. I think the nature is changing. Robots and drones and cyber areas are going to become the frontline vectors of attack or frontline vectors of defense as well, because they can robotically team and act faster than any other conventional system that's dependent on humans. And therefore, a lot of the war is going to in future become software defined. And if it is going to become software defined, we have to ensure that unmanned systems or unmanned technology or robotics and cybersecurity and connected infrastructure is our first line of defense or offense. And that is something which needs a greater boost on. And that is where a lot of indigenous capability at the subsystem level has to come in, because the iteration speed at that level is going to be very, very large. And
Right.
that iteration speed cannot be sustained unless we have that level of depth in indigenization and allocated budgets for boosting that part.